Tonight on Dr. Phil Primetime.
It's becoming trendy and cool and socially acceptable to be anti-Semitic. Every Jew and non-Jew, we all need to step up because we have the power to change our future.
I was stunned that so many of the people in Hollywood that are Jewish were silent. Has that surprised you?
They want the world to know what happened to them and what continues to happen to them.
It is a life-changing watch. Tonight, we've got someone who isn't just making music and entertainment, she's making a real impact. Montana Tucker, actress, singer, social media powerhouse, is using her voice to educate, advocate, and stand up for Jewish identity and Holocaust awareness. In the wake of October 7 and the Hamas attacks, she's been speaking out louder than ever, pushing for justice and change. This is someone who walks the walk. So stick around, because you're going to meet someone that moves with courage, someone that speaks out when others just simply do not. And you're going to want to hear what she has to say. Welcome, everybody. Listen, I'm going to introduce you to Montana Tucker today. She's not just a performer. She is a force for change. And she's sitting down with me to talk about resilience, purpose, and stories that really matter since October 7th. And she's earned honors like Variety's Social Impact Award, and she's captivated audiences with her series on Jewish identity and perseverance. And most recently, she led The Children of October 7th, a powerful documentary. I think it's the #1 documentary in the history of Paramount Plus.
When they took you, did you have any idea where you were going?
I hid under my mom's dead body for an hour.
They said, if you move, you die.
Do you know where your dad hid?
Soldiers found his body upstairs.
I was just focused on surviving.
If you haven't seen it, it's a must watch. And you may think, oh, that's going to be tough to watch. And, you know, parts of it are tough, I will admit. But I'll tell you this, it's moving, it's inspiring, and you'll be a better person for having watched it. Montana, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you, really. Thank you for having me.
And congratulations on the documentary. What led you to do that?
Thank you. You know, it is a big accomplishment because I'm just grateful that these children have a voice and a platform, and that a major streaming platform like Paramount Plus decided to pick it up. You know, anything related to October 7th is so sensitive, and especially anything to do with Israel. I feel like everyone is scared to touch it. So I'm really grateful that they gave these children a voice and a platform. I've always worked with kids. If you look at my social media platforms, way before October 7th, I've always danced with kids and just had a very special connection with them. And so when I got approached to do this project, it was an immediate yes, of course. They first asked, how much would you charge for something like this? I said, absolutely nothing. There's not even a chance I would charge for this. And this is before we knew Paramount was going to pick it up. This is when they were just wanting me to, you know, share this on my social media platforms. You know, these kids, I interviewed them a year after October 7th. So a year after they already had to go through all that trauma. And I'm grateful they felt comfortable opening up with me and recounting their stories. A lot of them hadn't done any interviews before opening up with me. And some of them knew me from TikTok or saw my dance videos, so they felt a little bit more comfortable sharing with me. But this documentary, I say it over and over, is not political. It doesn't go into the conflict. It's just a series of testimonies from these young children, recounting what happened to them on that day and what has happened to them for the past year at the time of interviewing them. So, and it's only 36 minutes. It's a short watch, but a very powerful and, like you said, necessary watch. And it's not easy. I have to admit, it's not an easy watch, but it's unfortunately necessary.
Yeah, and that's why I said I don't want to mislead people. It's not a fun, ha-ha watch, but it is a life-changing watch. I mean, it causes you to get outside yourself and realize the impact that world events can have on other people. And you bring an energy to it and an authenticity to it that's so important. You know my wife, Robin. You did her
Yes,
podcast a long time ago. When I said I was interviewing you, she said, "You are a force of nature."
Coming from her, that is an honor.
She couldn't say enough about that. I'm apolitical. I deal with cultural issues, not politics. Don't know enough about it to discuss it intelligently. But you said something earlier that I'd really like to get your take on. We've both spent a lot of time in Hollywood and that whole area out there. And you said anything about Israel and October 7th, a lot of people don't even want to touch. That's been my experience as well, because I had a show in Hollywood for 21 years and decided to launch my own network, which I've done now. But when this happened, I was stunned that so many of the people in Hollywood that are Jewish were silent, said nothing about this. Has that surprised you?
It's been the most shocking. You know, I'm the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, and I grew up hearing their stories my whole life, right? And I grew up hearing stories of them saying they had friends that they were friends with their whole lives, that the second all the announcements came out about the Jews and everything that was going on with, you know, the Jews being the reason for all the problems of the world, that turned on them, right? You heard those stories. I heard those stories my whole life. You know, when all this happened, you're talking about the Jews specifically, it makes no sense to me, because God forbid there was another Holocaust that would happen, which we know is not happening, right? But let's say in some alternate universe, another Holocaust happens. Those Jews that are not proud to be Jewish, or not declaring their Jewish identity, or saying they don't stand for Israel, whatever it is, they would be on that list. They'd be on that list. It doesn't matter how famous you are, how successful you are, how rich you are.
They would be at the top of the list.
Exactly. So that makes no sense to me. You know, I've had so many people behind the scenes to me, and I don't know if you've had this happen to you as well, come up to me behind the scenes, and they're at even a way different level in their career as me, right? And they come up to me saying, "Thank you so much for everything you're doing," like quietly. And that makes no sense to me. That makes no sense to me. You know, now is the time that I feel like every Jew and non-Jew, and that's why we are so grateful for you and all of our allies, because this is the time we all need to step up, because we have the power to change our future. And, you know, anti-Semitism has unfortunately always been there. It's never gone away. It's just unfortunately now more popular. And especially with the younger generation, which I have such a big following with the younger generation, it's becoming trendy and cool and popular and socially acceptable to be anti-Semitic and just to be hateful towards any group of people, as you see now on these platforms. It's like promoted. Like the more negative and controversial you are, the more you're promoted, unfortunately, on these types of platforms.
Why do you think it's taken that bent? Because, you know, one of the first things I did was speak out about what was happening on the Ivy League campuses. It went beyond anti-Semitism. It was pro-terrorist.
Yeah.
And you can dress it up however you want to, but it's pro-terrorist groups.
Yep.
Hamas has killed at least 48 Americans since its formation in the early 1980s. And they have been holding American hostages. I think they just released the last alive American hostage just a few days ago. They still have 4, we think, dead American hostages. They haven't released their remains. And yet we have right here, you and I are in New York City right now, and not far from here, Columbia University, we have students that are, at first, it was a thin veil of pro-Palestinian. There's not even a veil now, it's pro-Hamas.
Nope.
And these are young people. I have my theories about why they're doing it. What do you think?
You know, it's so interesting because I actually did a video with a man from Gaza. And he grew up in Gaza until he was, I believe, 16 or 17. And he left because of Hamas. And he lost several family members in this war, okay? And him and I did a video in Washington Square Park together. I do these videos a lot in public where I go out and try to have conversations and really try to like come to an understanding with each other. He is so against what is going on these college campuses. And this is a man from Gaza with family members who died in this war. And he was getting into arguments with people who had no ties in the Middle East whatsoever. Not Israel, not Gaza, nowhere in the Middle East. And he was getting into arguments with people because they were telling him how he should feel about this war and how he should feel about Israel. And he is always going against what is going on in the college campuses. So they're not, I mean, listen, I'm sure there are people who are genuinely, you know, for the people, but I've been to UCLA right after the encampment started and the protests started. And I just tried to have conversations with people to see what they were doing there, what message they really wanted to portray. They wouldn't speak to me. They said I had to speak to a media liaison, said I'm an agitator when I was just trying to have a conversation. They all had their masks on. None of them, I think, really knew what they were doing there, to be honest. And then when I went to the media liaison, wouldn't speak to me. Then they formed a human barricade on public property. Started with 2 people and wouldn't let me walk through because they knew I was Jewish or pro-Israel and I wasn't allowed to be there.
Yeah, I had exactly the same experience. I was on the UCLA campus towards the end of the encampment and also on the night that they took the encampment down.
Oh, wow.
And I went to the Hallel and talked to a lot of students, some Israeli, some former IDF, and some that were just born in LA and were going to UCLA. They were just Jewish students. And they were telling me, these people want us dead. Yeah. They follow us around and say, yeah, we want you dead. And they said they surround us on campus and won't let us go to our classes in the library. I went to speak to those in the encampment, wouldn't speak to me.
Of course.
I said, you need to speak to our media liaison.
And everything they were saying was it's like you could tell they were given like a rule book of what to say, what to do, and that was it.
Yeah, and they've got masks on. And so I interviewed some of the Jewish students right in front of these people at the gate. And I'm saying, do you believe they want you dead? They're saying, oh, absolutely want us dead. We're looking at them and they're going, yeah. I mean, they don't even pretend.
Yeah.
And so you are so popular really in every demo, but certainly with the young people. Who are the young people that are so responsive to you? Because so many of this younger generation have jumped on the pro-Palestinian bandwagon, but yet you still seem to connect with such a massive audience. How do you explain that? So many of this younger generation have jumped on the pro-Palestinian bandwagon, but yet you still seem to connect with such a massive audience. How do you explain that?
Well, for me, that's why I try to make all my content very unique and different. I actually made a dance video at the Nova site, and I went with a dance company from Israel that lost 3 of their members at the Nova Music Festival. And I went with Nova survivors, and I went with one released hostage that was kidnapped from Nova, Moran Stelly and I. And so when you watch this video, for the first half of it, you think you're watching like a music video. It's like a high production, like music video style video. And then halfway through, you're hit with the reality of what happened at Nova. And the story is told through dance. And I've always said dance is a universal language. Music is a universal language. So that video cut through a whole different audience. It got, I think, like 15 million views across platforms and like 30,000 comments or something like that. But if you look through the comments, they aren't just from Jews. They aren't just from people who are pro-Israel. They're from the younger generation saying, oh my gosh, that could have been me. I go to Coachella. I go to EDC. I go to Outside Lands. That could have been me. And they got it.
You're meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
Instead of asking them to meet you where you are. And that's what bridges the gap with your content, I think. People respond to it in that way.
And also the Children of October 7th, why that documentary was so important to me as well, is because the documentary is, yes, I'm the one asking the questions, but it's not about me. It's truly about these children. And I think that when people are hearing from kids close to their own age, their ages 11 to 17 of who I interviewed. So for me, this documentary is important for college students, but also high school students, high schoolers, middle schoolers, everyone, all the generations need to watch it because they're going to hear from kids. You know, we think about the Shoah Foundation. My grandparents did the Shoah Foundation, right? But that was told by the survivors when they were in their later years in life. This documentary is told by the children that are still experiencing this. I think it's like one of the first times something like, you know, obviously like this has been happening, or has happened, of course, where it's told in real time when they're still kids. And so that's why I'm hoping, and it's already cut through. At first, it was just for the United States, and it's going to be international, which I'm really excited for on Paramount.
You say that your grandparents are Holocaust survivors, and I found in talking to young people that it's not on their radar. They just, it's not something that they've ever learned about or know ever took place. It's not a reality to them. That's hard to imagine. And you're keeping that alive with storytelling. And you visited Auschwitz, and you say it changed the way you see the world.
Oh, yeah. You know, for me, it's so interesting you say that because Holocaust education, every state in the United States doesn't have to teach about the Holocaust, which is so crazy. I grew up in Florida. So Florida was a state that had to teach about the Holocaust. There are just genuine people that genuinely don't know, which is such a foreign concept to me. And my following isn't just the United States. My following is all around the world. So for me, when my grandpa passed away, he passed away at age 97. My grandma Lily is still alive today at age 96, but unfortunately suffering Alzheimer's disease of 16 years. My grandparents were my whole life, still are my whole life. And I knew I had to do something, you know, with their testimonies, their stories. And at first, my mom and I, we were just going to go to Poland, go visit Auschwitz, where my grandma's a survivor of. And then we said, I have the platform. I have millions of people that I could potentially educate about the Holocaust. And by the way, my content leading up to that was very fun, happy, dancing, you know, singing. There was nothing about activism on my platforms yet, not because it was intentional, but just because I was a dancer and a singer and actress. But I would do videos with people of all races, all ages, all ethnicities, trying to always unite people through music and dance. But it wasn't until my docuseries. And then we made that docuseries for the younger generation. And it ended up really making a big impact and taking off in a really, really special way. And it got to the younger generation. I actually visited a bunch of schools where the teachers told me that the kids were not paying attention in class before. And then I came to the school to talk about my series, and some of them knew me from TikTok. And I'm like, I'm not here to dance, guys. I'm here to teach you about the Holocaust. And the teacher said they ended up really paying attention way more in class. And Holocaust education is so important to me. And that's why I will always, even recently, I just posted some more clips of my grandparents' testimonies from the Shoah Foundation and made a whole video about that. It's the most important thing.
It is stunning to me when I learned that there are states where they don't teach about such a significant event in human history as the Holocaust. How can you teach history and not teach where 6 million human beings were exterminated? I just try to put myself in a position that people putting together a curriculum are sitting in a room and they say, okay, what are we going to include? And they come to that and go, nah.
It's such a huge part of our history. Have you been to Auschwitz or Poland?
I have not, and I absolutely intend to. And when people ask me about the most impactful books I've ever read, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, the first half of it, where he talks about his experiences there, had a huge impact on me. His storytelling about that led me to read other books and learn about it. And maybe that's why I had it's those early experiences all the way back to the 6th grade is maybe why I had such a strong reaction to October 7th and seeing what was happening on our college campuses, because there's just a complete absence of critical thinking. I mean, how can people be critically thinking and reasoning their way through what's happening in the world and take the positions they're taking? They just can't. They're not thinking. And our universities are not teaching them to critically think, or they wouldn't be taking the positions they're thinking.
Well, it's scary because I remember, like, you look at what happened during the Holocaust and you look at the colleges. There are images that are so similar to what was happening on the college campuses back then as well to what is happening now. And you talked about, and I don't think I fully answered when you said how when I went to Auschwitz, when I did my Holocaust series, How to Never Forget, how that changed me. I think my experience at Auschwitz and me doing that series is 100% one of the main reasons why I had this full reaction as well after October 7th. You know, I always say, and maybe you can help me understand if this could possibly be it. I say it could be like a generational trauma of some sort that I felt that right when October 7th happened, it was like everything completely changed in me. I couldn't even leave my place for a week because I felt guilty looking at my view outside. I felt guilty doing anything besides knowing what was going on in Israel. And I felt that, okay, if I have the millions of followers, this is even before like the crazy propaganda was coming out and all the craziness we started really seeing about the world. Like you would think everyone would be with Israel of what happened. You would just think it would be a no-brainer of what happened and how everyone would see it. And I just knew I had to do everything that I could to continue sharing the truth, simply the truth, and speak for humanity. That's all. That's all I've done, and that's all I continue to do, is go and share real-life, personal stories. I've met with all of the hostage families, released hostages, Nova survivors, kibbutzim survivors, the documentary, the children. Like, for me, it's important to just keep sharing these real, personal stories, and I feel it's like my duty. Like, I feel like I absolutely have to. There's no other option for me.
And I think you're right. It does trigger something in you because when you've had the historical connection you have with your grandparents and you've made the visit to Auschwitz to see the reality of what took place, and then October 7th happens and there were more Jews killed that day than any single day since the Holocaust. And we say that Holocaust could not happen again, but then there were more Jews killed in that single day. And my friend Ben Shapiro says it pretty well. He says if Hamas laid their guns down, then we would have a two-state situation. If Israel laid their guns down, we would have a second Holocaust. I'm not well-versed in geopolitics, and I certainly don't understand the balance of power in the Middle East. But I know right from wrong when I see it, and there is no moral equivalent to what took place on October 7th. Have there been children killed by the bombing that Israel has done in Gaza? It's terrible. You hate that. But that is not the moral equivalent of what happened on October 7th. People say, well, dead is dead. And there have been more people killed in the Gaza Strip than in Israel.
The hostages.
And of course there has. But there were more Germans killed in Nazi Germany than there were in England. Does that mean they were on the right side of history? No, it doesn't. That's not how you measure that. You have to look at the intent and what drives this. And like you, I've been there. I've talked to these people. I've seen the footage. The IDF brought me that footage, and I mean, they locked down the street. They brought in very, very sensitive footage beyond even protected links that people have seen. And
it's like you just wish all these people, especially on the colleges, all these people that are doing these protests, you wish they would just watch it.
You wish they would have to go into an auditorium and sit down and look and listen. because you can't watch that and say, oh, well, that was made up. No,
Yeah.
that wasn't made up.
No. They wanted it to be
And
filmed.
body
they wanted it to be
cams,
seen.
they were celebrating this. And then you have the footage from the cell phones taken from the dead bodies of the people that were massacred. From both sides, you can see what happened. And for them to say, oh, none of this happened, the babies weren't killed, elderly people weren't killed. No, that's absolutely a lie.
Well, that's why I find it so interesting, because the Nazis tried to hide what they were doing, right? They purposely tried to hide what they were doing. But Hamas purposely wanted everyone to see what they were doing. You know, one of the young girls, Yael Idan, that I interviewed for my documentary, Hamas took her mother's cell phone and started a live stream on her mom's Facebook intentionally. In real time, they just murdered one of her daughters, the mother's daughters. Yael has witnessed one of her sisters get murdered right in front of her. And then they live streamed the whole thing. It's a very famous video of this poor family, terrified for their life, blood all over them. And they did it on the mom's Facebook for her friends, for her family, and the entire world to see in real time what they were doing. Moran Stelia and I, her kidnapping was on TikTok. Hamas posted it on TikTok. That's how her family found out that she was kidnapped, from a TikTok video. You know, they wanted this to be seen. That's why all the denial makes no sense to me, because it's not like during the Holocaust when it was like up for speculation of what they were doing there. Like, this is all live streamed.
Yeah, people thought within a few months that sentiment would start to turn against Israel. It started to turn within 24 hours. I think that maybe is because they started pushing the line of oppressed and oppressor.
Yes.
And colonialism, and history just doesn't bear that out. That's just not the situation, and that's what I mean about the absence of critical thinking. When you hear people speaking so ignorantly, and when I say ignorant, I'm not saying stupid. Look up the definition of ignorance. It's the absence of factual information. When they speak ignorantly about this, what do you say to yourself? Because you know the facts. You've done the homework. You've seen with your own eyes and verified this. What do you say to yourself?
So something for me, and I'll start off with social media specifically. I never respond to a negative comment. And I get them all the time, every day, death threats, all the negative comments in the world. I've never once responded to a negative comment. How I respond to those is I keep educating and I keep posting. Trust me, it drives me crazy, especially after all, like, I'll have a day in Israel where I've just experienced, like, when I'm there, I don't really sleep because it's the work that I'm doing there. And I'm sure you can understand it's so tough and it's so draining, but it's necessary and you have to do it. And so I'll have like a long day of just meeting with these survivors, meeting with these families, crying with them, seeing the unimaginable. And then you have somebody comment something so ignorant or just mind-boggling. And you trust me, there's so many times I just want to respond and I want to say something and I want to say, how could you say this? I was just here. But I never respond to anything negative. I consider them to be like bullies in school. Like growing up, my mom always said, you don't give in to the bullies. And for me, that's just how I have responded to them on social media specifically. And when I do my talks, especially with the younger kids, when I speak to them, I always say, you do not respond, because that's what they want. They want a reaction. They're only commenting because they want a reaction, right? They're not doing it because they actually want to like change your mind on something. They really just want you to be upset or to be angry or to react. So I find the best way to react is by continuing to post and continuing to show my pride and continuing to share the facts. But trust me, inside it drives me crazy and it makes me so upset and so angry. When I did my Holocaust series, I had people saying the Holocaust never happened. Of course, you're a Jew making this about yourself. Your grandparents should have died. We're not going to stop until you die. And now the comments I get are even 1,000,000 times worse. But it makes me want to keep going even more, because if people are that ignorant and people have those types of feelings towards Jews, towards me, towards someone who's just standing for humanity, it shows why I have to do this even more and why I have to keep going.
How do you deal with the hatred and the death threats and stuff? Yeah, I've been getting them for a long, long time. You're pretty young, and how do you deal with that personally?
Well, I have a very strong, powerful Jewish mother who's in the other room here, who is very strict and protective. For me, it's weird. Like I mean, I get them every day, and unfortunately, now when I do any of these events or anything, I have to have armed security with me. That's such a crazy concept to me that I have to have that, and it makes me uncomfortable that I have to have that. But it's a real thing, unfortunately. And I just would have never, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, 6 years ago, if I would be in this position, I would say, absolutely not. There's no way. But unfortunately, that's the reality that I'm in. And it's a really unfortunate one because I wish I didn't have to do this. And I really, truly believe if anyone really sat down and took a dive into my content and took a dive into my real, true messaging, they would really, really, really see that I'm all about humanity, all about uniting everyone, bringing everyone together. There's no hatred towards any group of people. The only thing I've ever spoken negatively about is Hamas, or I speak negatively about terrorists, not about the people. And I really try to make that very clear. So anyone who is so against my stuff, it's really a shame because I wish they would sit down and really look at what I stand for. But yeah, it's the reality that we're in, and I'm sure you've been dealing with this way longer than I have. And I wish we didn't have to deal with this. I really do.
You focus a lot, too, on healing, particularly with these young people from October 7th, healing after the tragedy. What do you try to share with these young people?
The children that I interviewed, there were so many times when I wanted to break down when I was interviewing them because you're hearing them talk. I mean, Rotem Matias, he was 16 years old, and he witnessed Hamas murder both his parents right in front of him. His mother, being a protective mother, shielded him on top of him, and they murdered her right on top of him. And he hid under his mother's dead body for an hour. So Hamas would think that he was dead as well. And now he doesn't have parents. And you hear these stories, and I mean, they're all heartbreaking in their own individual ways. But then you see what they're doing to heal themselves. And Rotem specifically feels that he has a responsibility and a duty to his parents to live his life and to keep going. Because he said it would be such a shame if my mother did that for me and if I don't continue going and continue living my life after she risked her life for me. And then you hear, Ellie Dawn, who I interviewed, her father was kidnapped on that day. And during the time of the interview, there was proof of life of him in captivity. So we, had a whole part talking about what she wants to say to her father, or how she's going to feel when he comes home, and all these things. And then we had to change the ending of the documentary because 3 of the kids that I interviewed, their father's body, they were murdered in captivity, and their bodies were released in one of the last hostage deals. But they all have this will to keep going and to want, they're so young, the childhoods have been now stripped from them, but they have this true urge and will to want to keep going and they want peace. They don't want a war. They don't want to fight. They don't want any negativity. They just want to keep going and make a better future for themselves. And that's why they did this documentary, because they want the world to know what happened to them and what continues to happen to them, and that we can make sure, we say never forget, never again about the Holocaust, but it applies now to October 7th as well. And we all have, these kids are the ones that have the power to change our future. And the younger generation has the power. And that's why for me, it's been so important to get to them. And, slowly but surely, I know I can't be the one to change every person's mind in the world, but I think content is so powerful and using your voice is so powerful. And, you don't have to have 14 million followers like I do to make a difference. Every single person you talk to, every single post you share, every single colleague or classmate that you speak to, it can make a difference and can shape our future.
Think about the strength of a young man that goes through hiding under his mother's dead body. Think of the strength that a young man like that has to have to get up every day and find purpose, find direction. And, I've talked to some of these survivors, young and old, and the one thing I say to them is, give your feelings a voice. Speak out and speak up, because if you withdraw and if you isolate and if you get to thinking that you're the only one that feels this way, you're the only one that feels so burdened, you can get overwhelmed. And it's so cathartic to give it a voice and to speak out and connect with other people that are empathetic with you and or have been through some version of what you've been through. You know, there's strength in connection with this and in giving it a voice and finding out that there are those that get it, that say, I understand, at least philosophically, what you've been through, and we care about that. We care about you. We care about what you've been through, and we want to lift you up. We want to stand with you. I so fear that these survivors will think that they're a burden and think that the world has moved on. We have to let them know we haven't moved on.
Absolutely.
This isn't over. This wasn't something that it happened, it's over, we've moved on. That we still think about them, we still care about them, and we still want to contribute. They will never get over this. I hate it when I hear people say, oh, you'll get over it.
No.
Time heals all wounds. Time heals nothing. It's what you do with the time. And if all you do is suffer instead of create value, then it was penalty. If you find a way to use it, and what you're doing is drawing these people out and telling them that it helps, whether it's expression through storytelling or dance or artistic expression, some way you're pulling it out of them so it comes out of them and into the world where others can react to it and help them. And God bless you for doing it.
Thank you so much. And thank you really for saying all that. And that's why the documentary, when you watch it, it doesn't feel like your typical just like one-on-one interview. I had a lot of people say that it almost feels like observing a therapy session, because I really wanted to make sure the space was comfortable for them, where they felt comfortable expressing themselves and opening up. And I actually ended each interview with something fun with all the kids. So whether it was them wanting to film a TikTok with me, or Tanya Alomi, who was taken hostage, he was taken hostage on a motorbike, and now he rides motorbikes as therapy, which is such a crazy concept to me personally. And we ended that session after we did the interview, we went to the park, and I got to watch him ride his motorbikes with his friends. And so every interview we ended with something fun. They are just kids. That's what everyone needs to remember. These were just innocent children who had nothing to do with a war, nothing to do with a conflict.
It's about finding and pulling out resilience from them.
They all are the most resilient. So as far as you know, your dad came up here. Oh my gosh, wow.
You think that's like a bullet hole?
I don't know.
Or dad? They actually shot him while they were up? I know there's also a splash of blood over there.
What does it make you feel seeing this?
I hate seeing this. But it's like I'm trying to use it to process.
There is resilience there, and they will find a way if they keep putting one foot in front of the other. Days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, months turn into years. And through that, they will find tools, they will find methodologies, they will find ways to say, I can use this in my life. Not to ever say that it was worth it. But since you can't change the reality of what happened, you can change what you do with it. And that's what you're giving them, is tools to express that. And the thing that I worry about with some of them is kind of the survivor's guilt, the conversation that they have with themselves that, why did I come through this when others didn't? The thing that I worry about with some of them is kind of the survivor's guilt, the conversation that they have with themselves that, why did I come through this when others didn't?
I've heard that from a lot of not from these children specifically, but I've actually heard that from a lot of the released hostages that I've built relationships with. A lot of them say there's no chance they could heal until all the hostages are back. Like they say there's literally no chance. Some of them are healing in different ways, but actually two of the girls I just met, Emily Damari and Romy Gonen, they're just beyond incredible. But they literally say, like Romy doesn't even want to leave Israel until the hostages are home. She doesn't even feel comfortable leaving Israel at all. They all say they can't heal until they feel guilty that they were the ones that were chosen to be released, and that their friends are still there, or the other hostages are still there. So that is definitely happening for sure.
I've talked to some of those in country that are in the IDF, and some of the first responders that had to collect the bodies and body parts, that have told me that they couldn't even look at their families. It's like, why am I here and these people have lost so much and the hostages are still suffering, and they feel so guilty and not worthy to be free and able to go home and see their families at night when these people are suffering so much. And they really have a hard time with it. But if you succumb to that mindset, then that's the whole ideology of terrorist, is they don't come in waves of hundreds of thousands of troops. They strike, and their idea is to bring terror and disruption that spreads throughout the community, throughout the country, and disrupt everything. And if people succumb to that, then they win. And we have to help them fight that. We have to help them know that you can't succumb to that.
That's why sharing the kids, my documentary, sharing their stories with the world, that's a way to help. Sharing any story or anything that you see online about a hostage, a released hostage, a survivor, anyone, or even going back to the Holocaust, sharing anything that you see to keep these stories alive, to make sure that people don't forget, to make sure people are bearing witness if they don't have the ability to physically go to Israel like we have to experience it ourselves, to bear witness in another way, because that's what we need to keep doing to make sure that these are not forgotten, that their voices are heard, and that we're platforming them as much as we can.
Me and my sister, we were under my bed. The last sentence I told you was, "I love you." We hugged each other, and then she got up and helped my dad. They were like, "Open the door, we will shoot." And we didn't open the door.
People have asked me how I think about dealing with the post-traumatic stress disorder in Israel. And I think that's such a misnomer, because this isn't post. There's nothing post about the stress. This is current stress disorder. So this is something they live with every day, that want you dead.
And before October 7th also, they've always lived with that.
That's what I mean. This has gone on this is their way of life. And, when you're in Israel, these people are so cognizant of what's going on, but their spirit, their strength, their zest and energy for life is people. I know that most people can't and will never go to Israel.
If they can, I wish they would.
I agree.
If they can, I wish they would, just to see, because there's so many misconceptions. And the second you walk in there and you step foot, and the second you land, it's like this energy that you feel that you can't explain. But if someone has the means to go, I really wish they would.
Where does the energy and the warmth come from, living under this veil of threat and evil? I mean, it's astounding the resilience that the Israelis have.
I think that's why every time I go there, is this, and it starts with the children. It's not just the adults who have it. It really starts with the children because, like you said, they were born into this. Having rockets, they have safe rooms in their homes. That's a crazy concept. Can you imagine if every home in the United States had to have a safe room that they could go into when they're being attacked? Imagine if the U.S. was attacked the way Israel is attacked every day by 7 different fronts, I believe.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a way of living that we can't imagine, you know?
We were in the safe room the whole day, like
15?
No.
15 hours.
Yeah.
Were you thinking at all about your father, where he was?
I was. I actually texted him and I asked him if he was okay, but he didn't answer.
The day that I first landed there, we landed and went to a shopping area to get some food. And, you know, this is a area that's, I mean, subject to attack. And it's kind of an open air mall type area. And there are probably 200 or 300 kids in there. They're having a dance festival in there, and kids are laughing and playing and doing all this. And I'm thinking, I'm looking around like, you know.
That's Israel, though. One second you could be attacked, and the next second you're going to be dancing. It's a crazy concept.
And they're so accommodating. I flew by helicopter out to the kibbutz near really where the fighting was going on. The ground was shaking from the shells and all that were mostly being launched and all from the 2 of the kibbutz that we were in. And they down there said, oh, that's an Iron Dome unit. They don't want anything to happen to you on the way out there and back. And I thought, well, that's nice. I mean, they're just so, there's nothing they won't do to help and accommodate. Yeah.
Yep.
It's just it's a great country.
The Hamas members, if what they would do if their brother was gay, and they said murder them.
Yeah.
Immediately. Their brother.
Totally intolerant.
It's literally not allowed to be gay in Gaza, so I don't understand.
Yeah. And by contrast, Israel is so accepting and so
the largest
inclusive.
Pride festival in June.
What's next for you?
Oof. Well, for me, I will never stop calling for the release of the hostages until they're back. That's first and foremost. It's like, I mean, even before I met with them, I think Jews specifically, and also non-Jews, felt like these people were our family, and we've become this like big, big family. So I will never, ever, ever stop calling for the release of the hostages. I will never stop trying to combat anti-Semitism and all forms of hate, using my platforms, using my voice. That's on my activism side. I'm always trying to just unite everybody and bring people together. On some other things, I have 2 movies that are coming out, which I'm very it's over 10,000 participants from around the world, and I think they have like 20,000, 30,000 spectators. So I'm performing a new song, and I'm really grateful for that. And again, I think I'm just getting started. You know, I think that I've done a lot of incredible things in my life that I'm grateful for, but I think all of that led me to this place that I'm in now, and to continue using my voice and fighting for what I truly believe in. And, you know, I don't like the word influencer. I think it's gotten all these different meanings, right? But people used to be like, oh, you're an influencer if you work on social media. But if you have the power to influence and you're not influencing of what you truly believe in, standing up for what you really believe in, what is the point for that? So I will always use any kind of influence I have to stand up for what I believe in, for what is right, for humanity. And I hope I continue to make a difference in this world.
Well, you are making a difference, and your documentary, The Children of October 7th, which premiered on Paramount Plus, is their most watched, streamed documentary of all time, and is continuing to be sought out and looked at, and I recommend it highly to everyone that they do that. And we're going to put links to it on all of my sites. across all of the platforms. And I agree with Robin. You're a force of nature, and keep it up. And let's stay in contact.
Please, yes. Thank you so much. No, and I said this to you before, but I want to say it again. Thank you for your voice. And, you know, like you said, you've done so many incredible things in your career, and you've had such a long career in entertainment in Hollywood. But what you are doing now by truly standing for humanity and giving these people a voice and a platform also is so important, and it is so appreciated by so many people. So thank you from me, from the bottom of my heart. The second I saw you started posting about this, I reached out to Robin immediately just to show how grateful I was. So I'm sure you're hearing it all the time, but I hope you don't stop hearing it, because thank you. You're amazing.
Well, I do hear it, and I tell you what, I do it because it's the right thing to do. And Hamas doesn't care about Palestinian death. They knew exactly what would happen when they did what they did and ran back and hid among civilians at schools and hospitals. And
the man I interviewed from Gaza said that himself, by the way.
Yeah.
The man from Gaza says that himself about Hamas.
They knew exactly what would happen, and you would think the world would too.
That's why we got to keep going, and we got to keep sharing.
But I'll never stop, and I got a sneaking suspicion you'll be talking about it long after I'm gone.
No, we're in this together. We're in
You
this
bet.
together. Thank you so much.
I want to thank Montana Tucker for sharing her powerful story and shining a light on history that must never, ever be forgotten. Her documentary, The Children of October 7, is out now on Paramount Plus. And trust me, this is one you need to see. And if you're thinking, no, not really, it's just too heavy, it's too sad, you're wrong. This is a lesson in inspiration. It's a lesson in courage. And it is uplifting. Check it out. Keep the discussion going, and never, ever stop learning.